We're gonna go into 5 key concepts behind conditioning for soccer, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you want to be more explosive, you want to be more coordinated, you want to have better conditioning, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a beast. So in the sport of soccer, or European football, whatever you want to call it, I believe it should be called football, and I think that American football should be called probably just American football. But in this sport of soccer, right, a lot of issues that we see arise with different soccer players specifically coming into our gym and that are DMing us and messaging us is that they tend to feel like they're getting slower. They're running all the time. They're doing long duration runs. They're going out for jogs and they feel like they're getting slower and they're getting weaker. And what ends up happening is that because soccer has such a prevalent culture of doing lots of endurance work, they might have some knee issues. They might have some serious ankle pain. They might have some shin splints because there's so much volume. They even end up having some serious lower back problems, which leads to issues with cutting. And so all these issues start to arise because of how conditioning tends to be handled in the entire sport. And there's that culture, that old school culture is, hey, all you've got to do, you don't have to go into the weight room. You don't have to do any particular strength-based work. We've just got to get out on the field and just go out and go for a jog. Take 5 to 10 laps around the field and you'll be perfectly fine. But these issues don't go by the wayside, right? So they just continue and they progress from season to season, and athletes start to get slower as they age. They don't feel as strong, they don't feel as explosive, and it ends up hindering their overall performance. So that's going to take us into those 5 key concepts and those 5 key ideas behind conditioning for soccer that's going to help you develop better soccer players that are more explosive and actually have improved conditioning later in the match. So that 5th key concept behind conditioning for soccer is that we have to have coordinated endurance and acceleration, okay? So those are sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? We might have endurance, and if we can think about that endurance concept of being able to run for 4 to 5, 6 minutes at a time without getting entirely gassed. We've got to have good endurance. We've got a game that's 90 plus minutes, okay? It's 90 minutes long. You have to have really good endurance. But on top of that, there's a lot of stopping and going when we're talking about soccer. There's a lot of cutting. There's a lot of acceleration. So when we're thinking about coordinated endurance and acceleration, what does that mean? That means that we have to be coordinated over long periods of time. We have to have really good foot-eye coordination. We have to be able to handle different cutting positions later in the match when we're really, really fatigued. So that means we need to have footwork over long duration. I recommend if you are going for long duration jogs, so you go out for a 10 to 20 minute jog, maybe you do that once a week. Do it on a field with an actual soccer ball because that's gonna help improve that coordination late in the game. On top of that, if we're gonna do speed work, if we're gonna do acceleration work, do acceleration-based work for sprinting, for speed work, and for cutting. Do it with a soccer ball and without a soccer ball. Do it together. So you can do a couple sprint-based drills, cutting-based drills, acceleration-based drills, starts, the drive phase, things like that. You could do that without a ball, but then you should also bring a ball into your actual training, and you should be doing that about twice a week. If you can have high speed coordination that involves acceleration, now when you're running faster, when you're running and you're cutting and you're at that higher speed, you have better coordination with that soccer ball and you can make better moves and put your opponents in more precarious positions so that you can dominate them on the pitch. So that takes us into our number 4 aspect for conditioning for soccer, and that's going to be alternative plane endurance, okay? So when we're talking about this, we want to think about what happens with defenders, what happens with offenders. If they're on the move and they don't actually have the ball, they might be shuffling sideways. They might even be doing some crossover sideways, right? At a point, they might even be doing some karaoke sideways or backwards. They have to backpedal rapidly. They have to backpedal and cut and open those hips up to get into a better placement. So we need to have really good endurance on these different planes. We need to be able to train doing side shuffles, doing karaoke, doing side skips, even doing driving with the opposite leg. And we need to train that back pedal position. I recommend at least once a week, you set up a period, 10 to 15 minutes, and all you're gonna be doing is focusing on karaoke, side skips, forward skips, side skips for height, side skips for speed, skips backwards, backpedaling and then backpedaling into an open cut, backpedal into a side cut. Utilize this different work throughout that endurance, and you're going to actually improve the athlete's overall coordination while improving their conditioning. Now, we don't want to beat them up. We don't want to run them into the ground, but you can utilize this earlier in their practice. You could utilize this as a finisher at the end of their practice. You can even do this while incorporating passing drills, and it's going to go a long way in improving their alternative plane endurance. That takes us into our third key concept, and that's going to be dynamic trunk control conditioning. So think about what dynamic trunk control is. If we can think about our trunk, our abs, our back, our obliques, and how we have to utilize all this to coordinate so that when we're cutting, we're not collapsing with that upper body. We're going to be sprinting down the field. We have a ball in our feet, and we need to cut and then dribble at the exact same time without our upper body collapsing. If we have a fatigued dynamic trunk control, so we don't have as much control because we're fatigued, we don't have that endurance, we don't have that condition, now we're not going to be able to cut as rapidly, we're not going to be able to make as good a reads on what we're going to be doing from a playing perspective, and that's going to lead to poor performance. So some things that we can do as coaches, as strength coaches, even as athletes, as soccer players, is something that you can trigger to improve dynamic trunk control later in the game, is you can do something like a plank for a minute, and then out of a plank, you do an agility drill. Okay, so now you're actually pre-fatiguing. So you're using an old school bodybuilding concept of pre-fatigue. You're gonna be pre-fatiguing your trunk. Now you're gonna have to actually coordinate at a greater rate when you're sprinting. So you can do a side plank, a backwards plank, a forward plank, and then go into a full speed sprint that you lead to a cut, and then another sprint into another cut. And you can do this with a soccer ball as well. Another idea would be, okay, you take some side base work. Maybe you have an explosive dumbbell snatch from the side. That's going to trigger that side abs, your obliques, right? Or you do some overhead sprinting. You have a PVC pipe overhead, or you're even holding maybe a 5K plate or a 10 kilo plate, and you're doing high knees, and now you're actually training that dynamic trunk control with proper sprint mechanics, and it's going to actually improve your overall conditioning. So utilize these concepts, I would say once or twice a week in your warm-ups or at the end of your practice to improve your dynamic trunk control so that you have that condition, you have that endurance later on in the game. It's going to help you maintain that higher rate of coordination and that cutting ability that is paramount to dominating on the soccer field. That second key concept behind conditioning for soccer is going to be focusing on weight room work. A lot of coaches don't want to get into the weight room. Again, they're worried about their soccer players coming out looking like bodybuilders, being big and bulky. And they'll use those terms, forgetting that football players tend to be bigger and really, really fast and have really good endurance. Same with rugby players. They tend to be bigger than soccer players, but they still have really good speed and they have really good endurance. So we can take some concepts from these other sports and apply it into soccer. And that's where we can utilize, there's some ways that we can train in the weight room to improve our soccer abilities, okay? And it could even lead to greater strength, which can then lead to greater striking ability when we're going to kick the ball. But let's talk specifically about conditioning. If we've got weight room work, what can we do? Let's take a 15-minute time frame and we do on-the-minute full cleans, okay? So now when we're doing on-the-minute full cleans, we're actually gonna be targeting dynamic trunk control, but we're gonna be doing this in the weight room. So we can do a full clean, maybe we do 2 reps, we drop it, and then we hit a timer for 45 seconds to a minute. And when that 45 seconds to a minute is up, then we do that again. That's gonna improve our dynamic trunk control. It's actually gonna improve our ability to accelerate as well. We're gonna have alternative plane endurance because we're focusing on that core stability. And then that's all work that we're doing inside of the weight room. We can also do long duration isometrics. Maybe we're trying to improve that unilateral position. We can do bigger sets with single leg squats, and that's gonna improve our overall conditioning. That's gonna improve our strength endurance. Maybe we do a single leg squat for a set of 12 on each leg, and then we hold at a 90 degree with an isometric position. So we're gonna hold that single leg position for 30 to 45 seconds. Now we're improving that unilateral strength we're improving that unilateral strength endurance, and we're doing that in the weight room utilizing isometrics, utilizing big sets. So get creative with your weight room work. Realize that there's ways to train for soccer in the weight room, and it will drastically improve your overall performance. And that's going to take us into our number one concept, and this is the one that transfers the best over to the actual sport, and that's going to be in-game work, okay? And so one of the biggest things that I'm going to call out strength coaches, I'm going to call out soccer coaches throughout the entire world, is that I've looked throughout all of PubMed, I've looked on the internet, I've looked for everything to try and break down how often or how much endurance or how long is a forward going to be running? How frequently is a midfielder going to be running? How frequently is a defender, so a sweeper or stopper, going to be running in the game? And then a goalie. Obviously, the goalie is going to be a bit different. But what I was looking for is I wanted to see the yardage. Okay, I wanted to see how many meters or how many yards does a forward actually have to run and then stop, and then run and then stop. So what that does, and this is what I recommend all coaches out there do, is you can study each positional group. And you can sit there and say, all right, forwards, I'm gonna watch a full game, and I'm gonna time how long they're running. So you can either time how long, or you can actually try to measure the distance that they're running. For a normal game, a forward will run this often. So let's just say hypothetically in 45 minutes, the forward will start and stop, for 10 seconds out of every 70 seconds, something along those lines, right? That's a hypothetical. So what you can then do is you can take this data and you can do it over 3 to 4 games, and you can analyze the average is, all right, they start and stop anywhere from 40 times in one game, and they run for about 7 to 10 seconds. So that's a lot of endurance, that's a lot of conditioning. But what you can then do is you take that information and you can break up your team into those positional areas. And you can say, all right, you got your forwards, you got your midfielders, you got your defenders, and then your goalie. Your goalie is going to be training quite differently from those 3 positional groups. But now you can do interval-based work. You can do in-game work by utilizing those timing frequencies. And now you can take that and say, all right, we're going to work on speed. So we're going to do 3 sets of 10 start and stops with longer rest periods to really focus on speed. But then we're going to try and focus on conditioning the next week. Now we can do 1 big set of 30 start and stops, but it's over a longer period of time with shorter rests, and that's going to improve their overall endurance. And so you can get creative with that in-game work. And I recommend for all coaches out there, take that time, take that information and utilize it to drastically improve your conditioning for soccer. So if you need help with strength training for soccer, click on the link down below, head over to GarageStrength.com, and you can pick up our strength training for soccer program. And if you want more content around strength training for soccer, around conditioning based work for soccer, click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.